Hey everyone, John Doyle from OptixEQ with my partner, Emily Gullikson. We're going to talk about the Rebel. This is a continuation of our video series on pre or Derby preps. And so it's the Rebel grade 2. We're moving up in class now, Emily.
Yeah, we're starting to kind of figure out these horses, start to learn a little bit more about them, and looking for horses that are continuing to take that step forward and progress in these graded stakes preps.
Yeah, can I soapbox for like 2 minutes here? You know,
Sure.
I love this series, these qualifying series that they did with the Derby, because you get to see horses run against each other in different circumstances. They run back against each other. Like this will be the third time for some of these horses running against each other. And my opinion, I think we should do this with all the Breeders' Cup, major Breeders' Cup races. Have a qualifying series, not just a win and you're in, but a qualifying series just to see. There'd be no questions at the end of the year, I think, the horse of the year if you went that route. But that's me, and we'll see. If I'm ever commissioner one day, that's what I'm going to vote for. Okay, so we're going to look at the plot. And Emily, you want to really kind of get in, look at the plot, but most specifically to kind of focus on the favorite. Right, New Grange, who's going to be the favorite, and going to be a big favorite in this race, the Bob Baffert horse. So he was.
Yeah, and I think that now that we've gotten deeper into the preps, we've kind of had, kind of soft favorites, or maybe they're going to go this direction. Maybe they're going to look at this horse as the favorite. But with New Grange coming into this race, you have a horse that's 3 for 3, that won the recent race, the Grade 3 Southwest, and so will be a heavy favorite in this race. Just kind of based on that record. But as you mentioned earlier, we've seen these horses run against each other under different circumstances, and today's race is another different circumstance. So we're looking at the plot right now pulled up, and as you can see, New Grange is a square in quadrant 1, which is certainly favorable. The contention is a sun contention. The speed rate, I'd give that kind of a moderate speed rate. We've got those 3 horses above the par line. But again, we still have some lightly raced horses that are still developing their form cycle. So as we kind of go through horse by horse, we'll kind of look at the pace once again, but just kind of the overall looking at New Grange from that aspect, looks like a horse that's going to be forwardly placed in this event. Now, kind of getting into the past 3 run lines, looking at the Optix notes, it's pretty clear. You see that red just kind of jump off the page. He had that perfect trip, breaking his maiden on debut. Even in the second start, even though there's no red keywords, we do have that flow, which means he was with the race shape to have that benefit of that trip. And then another perfect free trip. Now, I want to kind of key off that debut because the extended comment there, where it has the other, it says, I don't know, John, you might be,
Yeah, the type,
even with blinkers on, I can't see it.
It says the type that needs to be out in front or outside horses.
Yeah, and I think that's key, because as we go back, if you can flip back to the plot really quick, and we can kind of see, keeping that in mind, a horse that needs to be out in front or in the clear of horses. You've got the one, Cavad, who is capable of showing early speed, drawn to his inside, and then you have those horses to his outside, 6, 7, and 8. So New Grange might have to put himself into a duel, which would be something new. He's had those perfect kind of free lone trips in the past. Or if those other horses come over and they decide they're going to sit back and rate behind horses, that could be a little bit problematic for this individual. So, well, I think in terms of assessing him as a favorite, he fits, but in terms of trip, there might be some nuance in here that could be a little bit less than ideal. And when you're looking at a horse at a favorite, as a short price favorite, and you're poking holes, that's sort of the hole I'm going to keep in mind in this race.
That was a pretty good analysis. I mean, I don't know if it'll happen, but it was good for me. The other thing I noticed about this horse, just as you were going through his races, he hasn't improved number-wise. I would expect it to move forward at some point here, and he just hasn't. So, especially with perfect trips, that you figure this horse would have run a bigger number. But the good thing for him, he's facing a lot of the same horses he beat, and of the horses that kind of ran against him, I'm not crazy about any of them, but who knows? Like you said, maybe the pace scenario, could change things. But
that is the challenge, and he just kind of looks like a lot of these Baffert horses that I've sort of disliked for almost the same reason, in the same case, just kind of year after year. the Authentics, the Medina Spirit, RIP. But, you know, there are these horses that just don't quite look fast enough. They just get these perfect trips, but then they end up facing fields that you're like, well, maybe they're just better than their group. And so I think that is a little bit of a concern as we go through this field, because for these horses to beat him, it would take the trip getting him beat and then also a move forward. So where do you want to go next? You want to go through
I just hate to just kind of belabor this horse. But the other thing I was surprised about in that race, the Southwest, that he didn't show more speed. And he doesn't look like the typical Baffert horse. He's kind of long, that horse. I don't know if you see, kind of leggy. And I, you know, like they're more aerodynamic, his horses generally. You know, when you look at a Bob Baffert horse, they kind of run low. They're kind of like, this horse is kind of like more upright and just kind of look, I would, you know, almost look like a Pletcher horse. But so I don't know. I just, you know, maybe this horse actually would be okay with more distance, but doesn't have that kind of speed that, you know, because I would expect this horse to blast to the front in the last race. And he was like, not near the lead. So that was just, I thought that was just interesting.
Yeah, it will be interesting because he was drawn outside that day and he's drawn inside today. So he's going to have to kind of put himself into the race.
Himself in the race early, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I look at the plot. I think it's like a little bit more contention because when I did, I don't know if we did it together. I did. This is the Southwest. You know, I just thought you had him, you know, much better. The speed rating was lower. The pace scenario was actually lighter, and I thought that he was a legitimate favorite going into that race. And and if you remember the Smarty Jones, which was the race they were all coming at. I mean, yeah, the Smarty Jones, but they were all, was it Smarty Jones? But this was the Smarty Jones.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah. So they all coming out of was like a race flow where closers did well, and that's why we kind of upgraded Ben Diesel in that race. But you know, when we come back to this race, it looks a little more contentious up front, and I think like a horse like Ben Diesel, and maybe we'll get into a little bit more when you talk about him. He's going to need to be more forward when he plays because that horse is not going to pass anybody. So I thought he got a pretty good trip last time inside horses. He just didn't kick, and it just seems like his mode. He doesn't pass horses. So I think they're going to put him into the race earlier. So I think you're going to get more pace in this race, and I think they might set up for something a little bit off the pace.
I think so too. And I mean, we can kind of start with Ben Diesel as we kind of go through horse by horse, but there was a lot of people that liked him last time because he did have that flow upgrade, because he had the foundation from those races in Kentucky, that key race, the Kentucky Jockey Club, that's been effective. And there's another horse in here that's coming out of the race that I'll make a negative case on later on, but he had that upside to him. And then just kind of looking at the, you know, if you like this horse and you're following him and you're kind of like, you know, if he gets the right trip and builds off that foundation, if you go back to the plot, it's not like his position today is that much different than New Grange. So you can make a value case that you're going to have, you know, 4 to 5 on one and 5, 6 to 1 on the other, you know, for people that are trying to keep the faith, you know, going with this horse. So I could make a case there for him just in kind of that sense. But again, another one that does have to improve.
Yeah, and that's the problem with, like, I've seen no improvement in terms of numbers, right? That's the other thing. You know, there hasn't been a move forward. It's kind of been the same. And you know, physically, I just think when I looked at them coming to the line in the Southwest, I mean, physically, size-wise, I mean, there was no comparison between New Grange and Ben Diesel. I mean, it kind of looks runty to me. But all right, let's just might as well just dig into the field then, Emily.
Okay.
And so we'll start with the one Cabot. I mean, this horse has had his chances. He just doesn't look like he can compete here. He hasn't been able to finish in any of his races. But I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I can't make a case for him in here. I think he's been a little bit fortunate in the past. I do think that, you know, if they for some reason do try to take back today, that would help New Grange, you know, in this type of spot. So that's the one thing about this horse that just in terms of a contender, I can't get there. But at the same time, I'm like, please send this horse from the rail, because if you don't, it will help New Grange. If you do, then we have a horse race.
I won't worry about that. He's got to go. I mean, if not, then they're just crazy, because this horse is not coming from off the pace.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's one I thought you might find interesting, right? I don't know how you pronounce Kairama. I don't know. That's what I heard. Kairama.
That works for me.
Okay. You know, this is one that came out of that Smarty Jones race. seemed to get the flow, but I love your notes on it because I agree with it. They're better than looked effort. And it didn't look like this was the race they wanted. I mean, they kind of wrapped up on this horse. He looks like a distance horse, by the way. I think this horse, I don't know what your chances you give him, but I think he's, where's he plotting anyway, by the way? His plot is not so great, but you gotta be careful. We talked about this before with these 2-year-olds going to 3-year-olds and they're growing. This horse got some upside potential as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and just in terms of prep, it just kind of seemed like that was his first start around 2 turns. And now he was kind of third race the form cycle, but that first start around 2 turns, being at the timing of the first of the year, given a little bit of a freshening. And I just noted too, I didn't put it in the extended comment, but I remember when they were running that race, I wasn't crazy about him that day. I thought he was a horse that was going to get over bet, kind of one of those wise guy type horses. And this horse took like absolutely no money. And I think I was live on Twitch that day. And I'm like, I wasn't crazy about this horse, but I mean, at 40-1, there are worse 40-1s than a horse that, has some ability and upside. So just another kind of piece of the puzzle. But I think as far as looking for a horse that's on the improve, that's a little bit under the radar, that could have a step forward. I believe this horse has been working at fairgrounds and since the Smarty Jones, and they're shipping in here. And then just kind of keeping in mind that Asmussen sent out, it's only been a week, a 5-horse last week to win that race. So, just kind of like splitting up the stock and then coming back to Oaklawn Park could have some positive intent.
Yeah. I think this horse has got some potential, so definitely, I think he could have hit the 4th or 3rd that last race if they even tried, in my opinion. Okay, Ojo. Okay, this is a New York horse, looks a little too slow for me. That Withers race was not to my liking, so I pass on me. Deep closer, doesn't have enough, so no need to spend a lot of time on him. Texas Red Hot, I thought it was a little interesting, but I don't like the layoff. But what do you think about him? I know you said something about the key race. The ultimate key race there, right? The Kentucky Jockey Club, which we were on that key race before actually anybody won out of that race. Now the Holy Bull won out of everybody's won out of that race.
Yeah, and you mentioned that because trends are so important in horse racing, because you want to get on them early, and then you want to get off them when everybody else is on them. So now I'm missing the name again, but Classic Causeway won at Tampa. Everyone jumped on the key race, right? It was like after that, it was all people were talking about at the fairgrounds last week with the winner, Smile Happy, coming back, and part of the reason that he was favored in that race. But I did a little bit of a deeper dive into this race. The Kentucky Jockey Club, not Gold Cup, but Kentucky Jockey Club. It's just such a habit of saying that. That the horses in the back half of that field, which Texas Red Hot was a part of, haven't done anything in their next races. They've been off the board. They haven't shown any run. They've been against lesser. And so that to me is a downgrade from that race. Those horses kind of still have to prove it. And then, you mentioned the layoff. It's been 3 months. So probably a good starting off point for this horse, but could be a horse that's an underlay because people are jumping on that trend and wanting to get cute in this race, trying to beat New Grange. And so this just kind of seems like a horse that people are going to latch onto. Now the horse has some ability, but still has to prove it in graded stakes company, still has to get faster. So there's all these other factors that would make him a big long shot, except for that one race.
Gotcha. I agree with you 100% on that assessment, no doubt. The Stellar Tap, here's a fairgrounds horse. Looked like he had him pre-race. He looked good. Trouble, start, traffic, no lead. Okay. So what's your thought on him? I mean, he shows some ability early on, right? Breaking his maiden, running a B+ at Saratoga. That's pretty good. And then, against the flow in a grade 3 in his second start. So this horse looks like he has some ability. So maybe there's some projection, improvement here. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of spent a lot of time on this because it's a tough read for all those reasons that you mentioned. I just, you know, in terms of class, even though he did have trouble in that race, it did kind of stand out and you would project a move forward. I still just kind of question in terms of class. And for him to kind of still need to improve off that allowance race. I wanted to get there. I like really, you know, dug in trying to like find the race and find the improvement because of those first two starts. But it just kind of overall, I just wasn't quite getting there as far as a win contender. And Asmussen having 3 horses in this race, correct?
Yeah, I believe
yeah.
so.
Yeah, so I definitely like looked at a lot of these horses to really try to figure out, like, you know, which is the live one, and this is another one that's obviously coming in from Fairgrounds and been training there as well.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about Ben Diesel. We don't need to talk about him anymore. We're going to go to the 8 Chasing Time. Perfect trip and an allowance. Good race, last win. Look like, you know, speed figures look okay. What do you think of this one? You've been watching these races at Oaklawn.
Yeah, I mean, the last race just being a perfect trip, free and weak, is just such a downgrade, and that was his best effort. So class and speed figures, those things have to be assessed, you know, kind of together and separate. But, you know, even just looking at the Optics figure range, that was a set 85 to 79 race today, and 94 to 88. So you can just see this is just such a big step up in class for this horse. And I think maybe another one that people will kind of latch onto because of those speed figures, you know, the kind of other Asmussen horse, and then just kind of going back to the plot. And you made this point that I think last week of sort of an EP type. What do you I think this horse is an EP type because that last race was his first race around 2 turns, wanting to be forwardly placed in this race, and then, you know, he's in quadrant 3. So one of those horses that's probably going to have to push, or maybe he's in this race to push New Grange for some of those other horses, Karama, Stellar Tap, even though Stellar Tap does have a little bit of tactical speed. That's just sort of where I think they might as well run him in this spot, but I think his role in this race is to push this pace.
We're going to confuse you a little bit more too. See, he's a PC, okay? So I'm just want to look at, and the reason he probably is a PC is, okay. So I don't know if you can see this box here on the bottom, it's kind of small, but if you hover over the run style, it tells you how we kind of built the run style. Kind of went away a little bit here. So, and so in the case of Chasing Time, you can see his standard and surface is really based probably more on sprints. And so that means, you know, he's able to run from 4 lengths off and do well. But if you look at his surface and distance, you can see, to Emily's point, he wants to be closer up. That 0.13 is when he ran his good races, he was really close up. So that's kind of the distinction there. So he's kind of a PC, but probably on distance more EP. And so her point's valid where, you know, this horse in the second call, even though he's got that big box, I know people probably freak out when we say this, you know, because they just think, I square, I'm okay. No, but the run style match with the plot is very important. So I agree with her. This horse may have problems keeping up. Horse got to work harder keeping up, and then it's almost like that square gets smaller and kind of moves to a circle because he's chasing. If he's going to be close up, because he has improved coming from behind and around at this level. Okay, probably too much information.
No, okay. I think that was good, because I think that's a horse that people are going to kind of get confused on, because he does look on paper like a horse that's on the improve, that's, you know, worthy of this step up in class and run those fast races. I think it is important.
And he might be, but he's got to prove it, you know, to me. So, yeah. Okay, so this is another horse that I don't know what to do with this horse. He came out of the Southwest, and look, I'll be honest, I don't like him. Okay, I know he was making a move at the end. He looked like he was closing. I don't know. He just seemed to at the very end, really flatten out to me. And that concerns me. And I was wondering what your opinion of this horse was.
Yeah, I mean, this horse has a lot of knocks, and they're more subtle knocks, because when you just look at him on paper, you see those 1s and 2s, you know, you see the speed figures, the running lines, you know, all that stuff, which kind of like would draw you towards him. But Again, that more nuance, go back to speed figures, he just hasn't improved. We've seen what he can do. He's topped out at a 90. He's got to come from off the pace. And then just, optics grades is so key, especially in these graded stakes races, because it really shows you which horses are on this level and which ones are just a little bit cut below, maybe on their best day to get a minor finish. And that's kind of this horse, because you just see those two B minuses. And even if he was making that big move and he's putting in that late run, if I thought it was a winning type effort, he would get that B. But right. He's just, he's sitting there with that B minus, and it just shows that it's not quite enough. So what you saw visually, where he does kind of flatten out, I mean, it could be distance, it could be class, it could be the combination. And it just kind of reminds me of that horse we saw last week in the Risen Star, Papa Cap, where we sort of made the exact same case. It's a horse that's, he's running these races, he's run competitive, he's pairing up speed figures, but he's like waiting to get exposed. And right. He did get exposed that day, kind of off those trips. So he looks great on the plot, looks like he's going to get a favorable pace scenario. But this could also be a case, because he came from so far out of it last out. You can see that running line to make that close, where they try to keep him closer to the pace today. Well, keeping closer to the pace, it's going to be a faster pace. So then that'll take away from his finish,
right.
And not quite get the trip.
That's right. Right on. If there's a horse I'm shorting, it's this one for me. Okay, the number 10, Ethereal Road, I guess that's how you say that. Broke his maiden with a B+ at Oaklawn, so he must have thought something about this horse. Kind of plots. Let's see, he plots as a closer, deep closer in this race, but a big square. I don't know. This horse may have some upside. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, his maiden win last time. I mean, you can even see the progression, right? Just kind of like, moving forward, had that better than looked, and, ran back to it. So has ability. That was just visually impressive, which is part of the B minus. Maybe jokingly, somebody said it should have been an A minus on Twitter. But because of the slogs, I did, only go to B+, and the slow start is problematic. That makes it tougher to overcome. Even with a closer that breaks well, it's tough to overcome. So now you have these combination of factors. You can play the what if he breaks well, but they kind of have to prove it first.
Even if he breaks well, he may be caught wide, right? Because he's still not fast enough to keep up, but you got all these horses inside of him. So it's almost like break bad and just tuck in at the back and make one run,
Yeah. I mean, because of that effort, even following him two back with that better than look, sort of like becoming a fan and a horse that, like, coming into this race, I was like, I'm probably going to make a case for him. And I look on paper, I'm like, oh, I just can't get there. I mean, and he also has to get faster. I mean, his numbers, he's at an 86 last out. 94 to 88, he's still sitting below Optics figure range, so would have to step up in class and run a much faster race and get the trip. It's a lot of hurdles. Yeah.
The one good thing about his maiden race, it looked to be pretty competitive. I mean, if you look at the Optics fig range, it was 89 to 83, which is pretty good. I mean, comparatively with some of these others. So, that's kind of encouraging. But I think he's one to look for him. Maybe underneath more than on top in a race like this. He could come running late, especially if the pace heats up. Maybe somebody come flying late. Dash Attack was another horse that came out of the Southwest. Really didn't do much. I guess you got some traffic here, but this horse kind of, I would say, was his, I guess it was the Smarty Jones, where his effort probably, he got that flow of the race that we talked about. And then he came back in the Southwest and really didn't do much. Do you see him move forward with this guy?
I mean, he has those two fast races, but they were benefit from the race flow, from that tactic plus, we can see kind of stand out. And going back to those first few starts, again, another horse that has a tendency to break slow. So you kind of draw that into today's race, where he's drawn well outside. He breaks slow. What are they going to do? This isn't quite like a deep closer like Ethereal Road, who can take back, and he's going to come with that big run. Dash Attack, they were able to kind of overcome with that more inside post position in those first two starts to kind of get that covered up, tactical, almost like a, not quite pocket, but kind of mid-pack covered up, inside out trip, where, you know, they break slow, they're caught wide, gonna have to send, gonna have to use. And, you know, a trip comes into play, class comes into play, running back to those fast speed figures with all those favorable aspects. He just looks like he's got a lot of hurdles ahead of him, maybe even a little bit exposed off those first 2 races as well.
Yeah. So summarizing, what do we got here? We have the 2 could be soft to vulnerable, all right, as the favorite. But, you know, when you start digging in and say, well, who could beat this horse? You know, I thought we made a little bit of a case for the 3, Kairama. That horse was a little interesting to me, Emily. But overall, I think that, you know, still the 2 is probably most likely to finish first, second, or third. I mean, just, you know, of all the horses, but, you know, he's going to be 4 to 5, don't you think, at least?
Oh, yeah, at least. Yeah.
3 to 5 to 4 to 5. So, hey, 3's 15 to 1 in the morning line. That's the kind of one I like. What about you?
Yeah, no, I went the same way. I want a horse that hasn't been facing all these other horses, sort of a new face, one that looks to have some positive intent, has some upside. I mean, if the 3 would have run back in the Southwest, he probably would have been our pick, right? Like
Right.
in that race off the Smarty Jones. So there's just kind of no reason. He's had a little bit more of a freshening. It's his first start of the form cycle. You know, Franco rode last time, so he's kind of sticking aboard. I think that's probably key given the trip last out and sort of how they rode, sort of figuring out this horse a little bit. Draws better today. And, you know, I know he doesn't look great on the plot, but we mentioned it going through the running lines, like why it looks like the way that it does. So there just could be upside there. These other horses that didn't beat New Grange last out are going to struggle. And then sort of the new faces that we mentioned with the 4, the 5 probably being a little bit below. 6, maybe you could make the case, but then going to the plot, it's like, what kind of trip is he going to get to beat New Grange? You know, just kind of a 1-to-1 Ethereal Road, one that's good kind of for underneath to come closing late. And then Ben Diesel, probably another horse underneath, you know, just because he has that tactical speed, maybe draws a little bit better today, does put himself in the race and maybe holds on for a share.
Okay, great analysis. Good. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to our new website. It's old and new, but it's been refreshed. OptixEQ.com. And thanks for support. Appreciate it.